If you have seen any of my videos, then you would know that I typically don't give a fuck about a perpetrator, and I will call you every single name in the book. You would also know that I never, ever, ever victim blame, and I have nothing but compassion for all victims. Except this time. Hi, guys. Welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. It's so greatly appreciated. Truly, truly is. Before we get started, let me give you my usual disclaimer. This video is for educational purposes only. Please do not take what I say as fact. Please always do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Next, if you have not liked, subscribed, or commented yet, please consider doing so. It really helps me out and I really, really appreciate it. Before I get started, major trigger warning that there is very disturbing talk about the essay of a very small child. So if that is something that you cannot handle, please click off and please come back at a different time. Along with this, I am not going to say that this is one of the most fucked up stories that I've ever researched, because I feel like every single time that I say that, the universe says, okay, Angela, I see you and I raise you an even more fucked up story. So I'm just going to say that this is really, really disturbing. And with that, let's get started. On the morning of June 22nd, 2016, Bemidji police responded to a fire at a double-wide motorhome that was located at Hillcrest Manor. The home belonged to 35-year-old single mother Melissa Norby. After the fire was extinguished, a search of the home would reveal the burnt body of Melissa. Her hands were tied behind her back and she was laying underneath a mattress. Investigators would also detect the smell of gasoline, and they would find a 5-gallon plastic gas container that was present at the scene. Later that day, the parents of a 5-year-old little girl would frantically run to tell police that their daughter was being watched by Melissa, who was the mother's childhood best friend. Okay, so to understand how this whole thing goes down, we have to go back a bit to May of 2015. One morning, Melissa would call her cousin Tuesday to fill her in on her love life. The girls spoke several times a day, but on this particular day, Melissa called Tuesday to tell her that her new boyfriend was a man by the name of Jacob Kinn. She told him that the two had gotten into an argument outside of her home and that Jacob first punched her in the face and then he R-worded her on the back of her car. Obviously disturbed by this, Tuesday yells at her cousin. She tells him that you better break up with this guy and you better stay the hell away from him. When she pressed her cousin further, Melissa told her that he did something bad, but that he didn't do it, but that she couldn't have him around kids. According to her cousin, the two would end up calling it quits after this incident. Okay, so who is this little fucking gem, right? 33-year-old Jacob Kinn is a well-known pedo with a history of targeting children for sex. He's registered owner of a portable food truck that he operates in the parking lot of a bait store. In 2013, he was convicted of 4 counts of child possession. While those cases were going through the court system, Kinn had allegedly posted an ad on Craigslist, posing as a photographer and claiming that he was looking for young girls to pose in skimpy outfits for a photo shoot. The ad went on to say that he was willing to pay $150 per hour for the services. Unbeknownst to Kinn, the person posing as the mother of the little girl, who would be the potential client, was an undercover police officer. After his arrest for attempting to purchase a minor child while out on bail, Kinn's computer was seized. A search of the computer would yield photos of child pay. He would later be sentenced to 4 15-month sentences that were to run consecutively. Melissa's best friend since childhood was a woman named Amanda Smith. She had a 5-year-old little girl that we will only refer to as B in this story. Melissa would frequently babysit for B, and because the two women were best friends since they were young, Amanda trusted Melissa wholeheartedly with her baby girl. Melissa and Jacob would end up rekindling their relationship at some point, and when they did, the two would begin to plan a way for Jacob to kidnap B. Yes, that's what I said. Yes, that's what I said. Melissa and Jacob began to formulate a plot to kidnap her best friend's little girl. What B's mother didn't know was that Melissa and Jacob would get off on having sex while B was in the bed with them. Oh, God. Growing up, Melissa had a very traumatic incident happen to her, and relatives say that when she came forward to tell her story, nobody believed her. And let me say again, that's awful. And if that's true, I feel terrible for Melissa, the little girl. She had very low self esteem, and all she ever wanted was for people to like her. In fact, she would go to great lengths to be liked. She was also desperate for love since she had had so many failed relationships. She was married to a man named Joshua Ellingson, and shortly before the divorce in 2010, he would end up being convicted of indecent exposure. The father of her son was a man named Justin, who is a registered sex offender in Nebraska. The registry shows that he was convicted of third-degree SA in 2002. So either Melissa has extremely low standards, she's a pedo herself, or both. June 22nd, 2016, Amanda Smith would drop B off at Melissa's house for the night. At around 3 a.m., a 911 call would come in reporting a fire at lot 824 in the Hillcrest Manor. This would end up being Melissa Norby's home. After firefighters were able to extinguish the flames, police would go in to assess what had happened. That's when they come across the mattress on the floor and the bound and burnt body of Melissa Norby. They immediately noticed that the majority of the fire was in the back of the trailer and that Melissa's body was in the middle of the trailer. So that doesn't add up. Along with this, the mattress and the body of Melissa were severely damaged, even though the bulk of the fire was several rooms away. Thankfully, Melissa's son was staying at a relative's house that night, so police were able to breathe knowing that her son was safe. But what about B? Where is B? Her mother was adamant about the fact that her best friend since childhood would never, ever, ever do anything to hurt her little girl, and she would definitely never hand B over to anyone without checking with her first. So, police go in again and they search Melissa's home extensively, looking in cabinets, cupboards, anywhere that a little girl would be hiding. And they came out and they assured her mother that B was not in that home. They searched the area in and around Melissa's home and still no sign of B. That's when they find out that an ex of Melissa had an arson conviction in the past. But when they speak to him, he's very cooperative and his alibi checks out. So they begin speaking to everybody that knew Melissa. This is when they come across her cousin, Tuesday, who would tell them about the punch and the R word on the car. She would also tell them that Melissa was into S&M, but more like daddy little girl kind of scenarios that she would play out with Chance. For context, Chance is the name that Melissa gave to Jacob. After speaking to Melissa's cousins, officers are very interested in talking to Jacob Kin, especially because of his shady past. He is no stranger to them. Officers first went to his home, but when Jacob failed to answer the door, they decided to get slick. Probably assuming that given the fact that he's a pedo and a 5-year-old little girl was missing, what are the chances he's going to answer the door to the cops? So they have Kin's probation officer give him a call that evening at around 10:30 so that they could see where his cell phone was pinging from. Kin answers the phone. He tells his probation officer that he is fishing near North Home, Minnesota. He goes on to tell his probation officer that he's pretty sure police want to speak to him about the missing girl because typically when you are a registered SO and a little girl or a little boy goes missing, police want to talk to you. So he agrees to drive up to the police station. He arrives there a little after midnight and goes into an interrogation room with 2 officers. Detectives say that from the second he stepped into that interrogation room, he was being deceptive. He tells police that he already knows about the fire, he knows about the missing girl, and he knows about the murder of Melissa. He tells police that he used to work with Melissa, but that he hasn't seen or spoken to her in at least 6 to 8 months. Lies. He tells police that he has never had sex with Melissa. Lies. That he was never attracted to her. Potentially not a lie. And that she was making up these stories because he was seeing a girl that the 2 of them worked with and Melissa was jealous. Lies. So officers decide to ask Jacob where he's been and what he's been doing for the last 2 days. He tells officers that he was fishing in Clear Lake, which is approximately 50 miles north of Bemidji, where he and Melissa are from. But when officers ping the phone, it would take them to a town called Big Fork, which is 40 miles southeast of Clear Lake. Lies.
Looking at child pornography, does it give you sexual gratification? It did a while ago. Did you share any of the clips with anybody? Send anybody? I probably did. Okay. Did you receive any from other people? Yeah. How old do you think they are, roughly? I have no idea. You guess 5, 6, 7? I suppose. Is there an age that you consider too young? It just doesn't do anything for you? Probably under 6. You know that these children that you watched in these clips were, say, under the age of 10. I guess so. Yeah.
You don't have to be very smart to know that your phone will not ping off a tower that is 40 miles away from it. Just won't happen. He tells him that he has no idea how his phone pinged in Big Fork because he wasn't there. He insists that he's fishing at a resort in Clear Lake, except he doesn't remember the name of the resort. He doesn't know any employees that can confirm an alibi. He doesn't remember what the dock or the docks that he fished off of look like. He doesn't remember any vehicles that were at the location. He doesn't remember what any person there that day looked like. And he doesn't remember what the resort looks like other than it's a resort. Well, that clears things right up. So thanks, old buddy, old pal. So police decide to shift the conversation back to B and plead with him to please tell them where she is so that they could bring her home regardless of the condition that she is in. But again, he insists that he didn't do anything to her and he has no idea where she is. They ask Jacob if they could search his car, but he refuses. It would take officers 4 hours to get Jacob to agree to leave his clothes and his phone. Police notice mud on the tires and they notice sticks and branches underneath the truck, but short of that, they have to let him go. A forensic analysis of his phone would be extremely disturbing. The phone, of course, was filled with pictures of child P, and to be honest, they were not surprised by that because that's what he is. That's so you expect that. That's exactly who he is. A dirty, disgusting, low down, no good, dirty, nasty child pedo. And shame on Melissa Norby for allowing this person into her child's life. Police would find a bunch of deleted text messages in Jacob Kin's phone, messages between him and Melissa Norby. The messages between the two would be sexually explicit in nature, and they would discuss in detail 5-year-old B. They would talk about SA with B, and Melissa would even give Norby scenarios about how they could kidnap her so the two could violate her in the most disgusting ways. Melissa would tell Kin to take B, and after he got her to a secluded place, she would go to law enforcement and she would tell them that an unknown assailant had come, attacked her, and took off with B. Jacob's phone would also reveal searches for lethal doses of medications and how to acquire horse tranquilizers, pediatric sedatives, anesthesia, roofies, etc. The searches began in early May of 2016, which was a little over a month before the abduction took place. June 21st, 2016, Jacob Kin went over to Melissa's home while she was watching B, and the two engaged in sex. During it, he placed a belt around Melissa's neck and he began to choke her until she went limp and had blood coming out of her mouth. He pulled her pants up, he placed a mattress over her to conceal the body, and he took off with B. Kin would later admit to police that B had been present and naked during the sexual encounter, and that they would have her there as a way to enhance their sexual experience. This was also not the first time that they attempted to put this plan into place. They were going to do this 6 months prior, but something happened and Melissa ended up not watching B that day. Kin drove B to a property that his brother owned that was about 5 miles north of Big Fork. Once there, he would SA baby girl B. After the attack was over, he bound B's feet with tape, drove over to Melissa's home, and set it on fire. While the interview with Kin was taking place, police were heading over to Big Fork to look for B. They described the area as pitch black without a street light in sight. Back at the station, police discover that a Kin owns a property about 3 miles away from his cell phone ping. They start heading in that direction and they come across tire tracks leading off a road. And these tracks actually match the tracks of Jacob's Jeep. So they get out and they begin to follow the tracks on foot. About a half mile up the road, they find a camper and they see that the tracks are leading them right to it. When they walk up to the camper, they see that it's taped shut with black electrical tape. They enter the camper and they find baby girl B. She's alive, she's happy, she's beautiful, she's such a strong little girl. Her ankles and her legs are taped together and she has scratches and bruises on her arms. But other than that, she says she's okay.
Is it okay if I come in? Okay, you don't have to be scared, okay? We're the police. My name's Rob and this is Dom. How old are you?
Probably 5 or something.
Probably 5 or something? Okay. Where are you taped at? Okay, anywhere else?
Okay, we'll call your mommy pretty soon here.
The officer on the scene takes a picture with her and he sends it to his colleagues and writes, "Arrest him." About 90 minutes later, Kin is spotted driving his father's car. He was arrested and he's taken into custody. They actually located him on the way back to the camper, and it's believed by officers that he was going to do one of three things. He was going to kill baby B, he was going to move baby B, or he was going to do something to keep hiding her from the police. Kin is brought into the interrogation room once more and given one more chance to come clean. Unaware at the time that police have the text messages between him and Melissa, and more importantly, they have B, Kin denies everything. So, they show him the picture of B, tell him that they know more than he thinks they do, and it's time for him to come clean. So he admits to being at Melissa's home the night of the fire and the kidnapping. Because Kin took a plea deal, baby girl B would not have to relive her experiences in court. Her and her family could now begin to heal. And Kin is sentenced to 52 years behind bars. While researching this story, I came across a story by a woman named Nicole McKinnon. Nicole tells the story of her then 13-year-old daughter, M, and how she was groomed by a trusted adult. The reason that Nicole is sharing M's story is because at the time, in 2018, the laws in Minnesota for child pedos were a fucking joke. Jail time was not required for the possession and or distribution of child's pee. Nicole and her daughter were fighting for a desperately needed change. So let's break down M's story that she so bravely shared in hopes to stop this from happening to more of our youth. In March of 2017, 13-year-old M was a pretty typical middle school student. Her biggest worries in life were how people were going to react to the braces she was going to be getting, boy problems, and fights with her girlfriends. She loved snowboarding and skateboarding. She was on the school swim team. She was voted class president. And because of the work that she did as a member of the student council, she had gained a huge amount of respect from the teachers and the administration at her school. She was also given special privileges because of this. Privileges such as being allowed to hang out in certain teachers' classrooms, being allowed to charge her cell phone in the assistant principal's office, being allowed to stop in the office in between classes to check her phone or to send a quick text. Nicole says that these were all privileges she was proud of her daughter for achieving. Never realizing that there were red flags waving everywhere, she just didn't see them yet. Then in late March of 2017, Nicole is hit with information that she described as feeling like a baseball bat to the head. Investigators from the sheriff's office show up to her job to inform her of what's been going on right underneath her nose. Someone had been sexually grooming her daughter online via Facebook and Snapchat. The person behind the profile was a grown man who was posing as a middle school boy from Duluth who had recently lost his mother. He tells M that he feels alone and afraid. So M, being the compassionate soul that she is, has an immense amount of sympathy for this stranger that thought enough of her to reach out to her and to confide in her. The two would speak quite often, and she wanted to do everything that she could to help her new friend cope with this tragic event that had been dropped in his lap. They would talk on a constant basis for hours a day, and they became extremely close. The boy from Duluth would compliment her on a daily basis and make her feel like she was the most beautiful girl in the world. Then the conversations would gradually turn sexual in nature, and eventually he would convince H to send him nude photos of herself. Nicole allows officers into her home, into her daughter's bedroom. They were allowed to interview H. They were allowed to take photos of anything that they needed, and they were allowed to take anything and everything that they needed. The anger that this poor mother must have felt when she learned that a grown adult was manipulating her daughter in order to get naked pictures of her to do sick and twisted things with is just unimaginable. Officers told Nicole that they could not reveal the identity of the perpetrator, though, until they had him in custody. Fair. Don't want to ruin anything, right? Totally get it. So in the meantime, Nicole decides to try and be proactive about the situation and inform the school that H may need some special considerations over the next few days because she's going through something very, very traumatic. On top of this, she also wanted to build a support system for her daughter and I'm sure for herself. I would 1,000,000,000% think that Nicole would need a support system around her. You know what they say, you're only as happy as your least happy child. Nicole decided that it would probably be best to reach out to H's assistant principal. So she phones the school, but unfortunately, he's not available to speak. So she decides to call his personal cell phone, which he had given her his personal cell phone number because there was a point in time where he was helping H with a lot of issues that she was having. But this call would go unanswered as well. A weight would be lifted off of Nicole's shoulders when a black SUV parked in her driveway. She thought to herself, they have this grape in custody and now we can begin to heal and we can begin to move on. But that feeling wouldn't last long at all. The person that had been grooming her child was none other than the assistant principal at Bemidji Middle School. The same assistant principal that Nicole called for support for her daughter. The same principal that had been helping M with so much in the past. The same principal that would allow M to charge her cell phone in his office. Officers tell Nicole that he had already confessed to the crimes. He had naked photos of M that he was using for his own sick pleasure, and text messages that were so disturbing that it sickened a seasoned detective. Now it's time to tell H the truth about the boy from Duluth. Nicole sat her down, told her that she loved her, and told her that everything was going to be okay. Then the detective broke the dreadful news to her. They say it took her a few minutes to process the information that was being told to her because again, she's 13. But when she did, she understandably broke down immediately. The investigator, who was described as a big teddy bear, would have to excuse himself as his eyes were filling up with tears. He would later explain that he had a daughter that was the same age as H, and he promised her that he would do everything in his power to put this scum sucker where he belongs. The following day, Nicole walks into the school, seeing red, obviously, managed to speak to the principal and demanded answers about her daughter's future. She says after leaving the school, she headed to the head office to speak to human resources. Mama Bear walked into those offices demanding answers and says that not a soul would dare tell her no. During this meeting, the district informed her that the assistant principal was still an employee of the Bemidji School District, but that he had been put on administrative leave and he would still be receiving his paycheck unless a conviction was made. Nicole left that meeting even more furious than she was before, but she didn't really have time to even worry about it because she had to head down to the courthouse for the arraignment. And she says when she got there, she sat right in the front seat. Then Nicole says that she must have looked like a nutcase because the court had a bailiff on each side of her. Because the assistant principal, Brandon Bjerkins, was a first time offender, or because he never got caught, he was given two options. He could post a low bail, and it would come with conditions such as no access to the internet and no contact with children. Or he could post a high bond, and it would come with no conditions. He picked the high bail. So, in other words, he bought himself his freedom. There were no restrictions put on him. He could go to the park and watch children. He could go home to his wife and his kids. He basically resumed everyday life. This made me want to jump through the computer screen. And it's not even my child. So I can't. But then I sat back and I thought, oh my God, but this could have been my child. This could have been your child. This could have been any of our children. After the arraignment, more like the timeout, I call it, because that's really what it was timeout, was over, the prosecutor met with Nicole to break things down with her and explain to her what the next moves would be. He told her that he was not at all surprised by the outcome. He tells her that because Brandon is highly educated, has a squeaky clean record, and being a first-time offender meant that he had 0 criminal points. Are you asking what 0 criminal points are? Because I was like, what the fuck are 0 criminal points? So, he then pulls out Minnesota's sexual offenders sentencing guideline grid and plops it down in front of her. He explained to her that because there were only 2 to 3 charges at the time, this meant that the recommended sentencing for him would be no jail time and no registering on the SO list. This infuriated Nicole. This piece of trash in a position of authority that her daughter trusted violated her in the most disgusting ways and had most definitely given her scars that she will carry with her for the rest of her life. 1,000,000,000%. There's no arguing that. But because he's a first-time offender, because he never got caught, nothing happens to him. Even I was shooketh when I heard this. Nicole would later talk about the horrible thoughts that went through her head. And just to be clear, she's not proud of them. She would secretly hope that more children would be violent in the same way as H, because it seemed as though that would be the only way that she would ever receive the justice that she deserved. Truth, if I'm being honest, I may have had the same thoughts if, God forbid, that were to happen to my baby. She describes the grid as a sick board game that they were losing. Then she has to break the news to H. What a fucking gut punch. She didn't understand why this person was not being given any sort of consequences, which ultimately left her believing that it was all her fault. Because surely if it was his fault, he would be getting punished for his crimes, right? So, in other words, instead of walking away from a life lesson learned the really, really hard way, she walked away with baggage and guilt for something that was not her fault. But it gets so much worse, my friends, so much worse. It would later be discovered that H was not his only victim. In fact, there were 55 more of them out there. Nicole says that she thought for sure that this was enough to lock him up and throw away the keys. But once again, she was wrong. According to Minnesota law, only a few of the pictures that were on the computer of children that this person saw and mentored on a daily basis were considered criminal. Thankfully, the federal government decided to step in and sentence Bajorkins to 25 years under federal guidelines, along with making him register as a federal SO and have a lifetime supervision after his release. A lawsuit brought against the school board by the parents of two of the victims would reveal that Bajorkins had a system for gaining access to his victims. He would invite them into his office to hang out and give them candy. He had a drawer full of cell phone chargers, and he would allow the students to charge their phones in his office. While the phones were charging and the students were in class, he would go through them to look at the pictures on their phones and to write down their social media handles so that he could reach out to them later posing as a teen. The 55 victims were both male and female, and they were as young as 12 years old. Because he was using a school-issued phone to reach out to the children, parents felt as though it was the school's responsibility to monitor the web activity of their staff. The lawsuit also claims that 6 months prior to Bajorkins being arrested, one student's parents reported to the school that somebody was posing as a teenage boy on social media and taking advantage of their daughter. They say that the school knew their students were being targeted, but that they decided to never perform an investigation. A lawyer for the parents said that they hope the lawsuit will prompt the district to work harder at protecting their students in the future. All right, guys, if you're still here, thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you and I appreciate you so very much. If you have not liked, subscribed, or commented yet, please do so. It really helps me out. And I really appreciate it. And until next time, stay safe out there.